Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 34 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
This is our 75th total episode since we started in Season 1.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm. 75.
That's some sort of milestone.
It is, yes. That's correct. Correct.
We still haven't decided what we're going to do for the next season.
We still have not.
I have asked your brothers and your mother, and none of them have an opinion. They don't care.
Well, that's why they're not on the show. They don't have unlimited opinions.
They have limited opinions.
They do.
They have appropriate opinions upon important subjects to them, but they don't have opinions on everything like you and I do. Well, like I do. I don't know if you do. Do you?
I don't know.
I think you're.
I mean, we've been doing this for 75 episodes. If it turns out that I don't have unlimited opinions, I think I've been lying this whole time.
True.
We are, as always...
I don't have an opinion on that.
Thanks for interrupting me with that brilliant thought. I appreciate it. We are, as always, reading Jake Jackson's Myths and Legends, a book about world mythologies from...
around the world.
Yes, of course. We are continuing with our talks on Scottish mythology, Scottish folktale here, continuing into Legends of Fairies and Sea Folk. So we talked a little bit about this, I think, last time, and sort of like the idea of the unknown, like just on the border of the hills sort of idea. It's very different coming in from the Norse myths to this, because the Norse myths, excuse me, were just like completely, kind of disconnected to humanity. Humans only popped up every once in a while, but in these Scottish folk tales, more than myths, it's more like, the unknown is right there. These deities or these fairies, these creatures are just right outside, kind of your peripheral vision almost.
Yes. And they are more like folk tales, I think. And I my favorite chapter so far. Or favorite.
Your favorite, really?
Favorite by far.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, they're just entertaining little folk stories. And I was thinking as I was reading them, they remind me of Irish, tales and.
Oh, they're definitely related.
Yeah, right. They're pretty close in geography.
They are. Believe it or not, Ireland is close to Scotland. Big shock to...
But I know my mom used to like these kind of stories and stuff like that. She was a storyteller worse than I am.
Oh, no.
What? She would always devolve into multiple subplot lines and asides as she was trying to tell any sort of story.
I have one of my friends, I won't name him. If he is listening, he knows who he is, but he is not listening.
There's no one.
There's no no, of course not.
Crazy.
Of course not. But he will tell stories, and he'll start them off like they're going to go big places. He lays down a million plot points, just a million just characters and this and backstory. And then as soon as he's done giving all this backstory, the story itself is one sentence, and then it ends. And we're like, where did this go? What was the point of spending 15 minutes telling us all the backstory behind a one-sentence story? It's very funny. He does it all the time. All the time. Yeah.
Not an effective... he needs an editor.
Yes. He needs someone to screen them with before he shares them with other people. Yes. I guess we should jump right into the Legends of Fairies and Sea Folk.
Yes. And, he says in the introduction, I like his little introduction, and he says it's like these stories are used to tell, or explain things that are frightening or, to explain a cause for something they don't understand. I don't know that I saw that in each one of them. Maybe I think there's some kind of morality tales in some of them, but they just seem like good stories.
Well, it's very specific. It's not like this general thing in nature. Right. It's more of an explanation of this town, this hill just outside, this boundary here. Here's where the fairies lived, and that sort of thing. So it's not necessarily, so it's different from what we've seen in past myths about this is how the world works, and more so this is how these individual groups of people experienced this.
I guess the exception to that would be the first story, which is the seal story.
Yes,
which I think is a creation of the seal story.
Possibly, yes. And we can go ahead and get right into that.
That was my segue.
Yes, that was a good segue with Macadram's seal wife.
Macadram's.
Yes, thank you for repeating that. Deep in the sea, there lived a king and queen who had lovely sea children with deep brown eyes and beautiful voices. They all lived happily until the queen grew ill and died. The king was concerned for his children's well-being and so decided to find his children a new mother. and so he traveled to a darker part of the ocean, coming upon a witch who put him under a spell. The king was persuaded to take her home, where she tended to the children but never loved them, and so the waters grew cold, and the witch decided to dispose of them. She cast a spell, turning the sea children into seals, who could only leave the sea 1 day a year. They had lost their beauty, but their soft brown eyes and beautiful voices remained the same. Time went on, and they loved shedding their coats and becoming children once a year. And it was on one of these occasions that they were seen by a fisherman named Roderick MacCodrum of the clan Donald and the Outer Hebrides. Seeing the beautiful children, he desired them, and so stole one of the seal pelts and hid it in the rafters of his barn. Before long, a beautiful seal woman came to him, asking if he had seen the coat, to which he feigned concern and instead offered her a life on his land as his wife. She reluctantly agreed, and although she bore him children that she loved, her heart grew cold and lonely, becoming known as a selkie, and often singing on the shores, which gathered seals to listen to her. One day, her unknowing child found the missing coat, bringing it to her, and the mother kissed her and said that she would return eventually. Roderick MacCodrum of the Seals returned home that night to an empty cottage, and the Selkie never returned, but her children often heard a happier voice in the waters, and often saw a graceful seal whose presence comforted them, especially when the sun caught her familiar, soft brown eyes. So, like you were saying, this is almost an origin story for seals as a whole, definitely characterizing sort of these weirdly, I guess, humanoid-looking creatures to, I guess, a lot of these Scottish people, which is a fair, I think, assumption to make about certain animals. You kind of look at their eyes, and they have very scarily human eyes. Archie, our dog, has kind of scarily human eyes. His very human eyes.
He is possibly the reincarnation of my dog, Teddy.
Really?
Yes.
Thank you for that bit of information, I guess. What do you think of this story? Good thoughts.
I never knew that seals sang.
I guess they do, yeah.
I mean, I knew they kind of like barked, barked like a seal, but I didn't know they had a song.
Yeah, I guess they have to have some sort of howl almost that would sound similar to a human voice.
Yeah, because that's
like foxes, they have like a particular cry that are known for like sounding scarily like a woman screaming.
Right.
That's a big scary thing to hear in the woods.
Yes, it's like a foxy woman.
I don't.
It's not a woman. It's a foxy woman. You know, like a foxy sounding. It's fox. It sounds like a woman, so it's a foxy woman.
I don't think so. But thank you.
Isn't that where that came from?
I don't think so at all, actually. But thank you for sharing.
So, what are your thoughts on this? It was this was my least favorite of them. The stories in this chapter.
It definitely is an example of the trope that we saw several times, especially in the Chinese myths, of somebody stealing a woman's clothes and that being the reason that she comes and lives with him. So clearly this is something that a lot of people have thought of over a lot of different places at a lot of different points in time for this to pop up in different mythologies. I think we saw this in one other group of mythologies. I can't remember which one, but I remember it was distinctly two separate stories in the Chinese myths in which somebody, in those cases, they were both swans. They stole the swan coats of these women, and they had to come live with him. So it's definitely an example of those. It's just curious. Why do you think that we tell stories about that? What is the meaning there?
I don't know. I think it's a form of bondage, and it's a way for a really ugly guy who lives in a hut to get a beautiful woman.
I guess so.
By essentially extorting her or forcing her to stay with him.
I guess there has to be some sort of metaphor there, you think? Like some sort of deeper meaning. Maybe like losing her beauty or her status as a single woman and coming to live with the man. I don't know. I feel like there has to be something deeper there that we're missing.
I think it has to do with the clothes protect the women from the man's gaze or his advances, I guess. And it's kind of a secret, and a mystery. And I'm not really sure. But I think, before indoor plumbing, that's where you'd wash off, is in a lake or a stream or something. And so I think that it was more of a common occurrence to stumble upon some creek where some gals washed herself and peeking at her or something.
That is fair.
Because the only way in modern times in America, that happens is if you're, some sort of pervert and trespasser and peeking in somebody's window.
True, true.
So there are stories of that, but they're usually in police reports, not in mythology. I thought this was a sad story.
Yeah. Definitely very melancholy. Like, there's some beauty there, but it's like really kind of in a twisted,
well, I think
not great setting.
Well, certainly the Macadrum is a horrible person.
Yes.
But she certainly loved her children, but it was so sad because she wasn't where she belonged,
Mm-hmm.
and she pined for the life in the sea as a seal, because it became accustomed to that or preferred or whatever. And then when she had the ability to go, she said she'll be back, and then left. And felt bad for the kids.
Yeah.
Now they're stuck with the basically rapist dad.
Yeah.
Who didn't seem to be too upset in the story about well, she's gone.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a sad story. It wasn't inspirational to me. I was like, oh. Well, it's it's a morality tale about. I think the only lesson I would get from it. And I always try to get a lesson from every story. If I can't, then I don't like them.
Yes, I'm aware.
The lesson I would take from this is marry a woman who loves you.
Yeah, that's a good lesson.
And because, she may stay with you, you may have kids, she would be devoted to the kids if she's a good person, but she's never really going to be happy.
Yeah.
Unless
because she's not where she belongs. I think that's the story here. She was not where she belongs, and she had to go.
Right. And he, kind of tricked her, but kind of forced her into this relationship, and it worked out for, I guess, a little bit of time. But I don't know, that's my point.
Sure,
and then
that's a good point.
Now the kids are they don't have a mother anymore.
Yeah, poor kids.
But she comes by and waves at them with her little flipper hand.
Yeah,
it comes closer to shore. And there was a story. They go down to see the seals. And, she breaks off from the pack and says hello.
That is true.
Seal way with her brown, spooky eyes.
Yes, that is true. Thank you for that.
All right.
Good thoughts. Good thoughts. We can go ahead and move on to the next story: the fairies and the blacksmith. The blacksmith Alistair MacAircairn once lived with his son Neil on the Isle of Islay. And when Neil was a child, their neighbors warned them of the fairies who lived just over a hill, who would certainly want to steal Neil. So Alistair hung a rowan branch above the door every night to ward off the fairies. They lived this way for many years, until Alistair one day had to travel a distance, reminding Neil to hang the branch before night. But by the time Neil had completed all his chores for the day, he fell asleep immediately without even thinking of the branch. Later the next day,
I think you skipped over two important parts.
Okay.
One important part is that there seems to be a theme in all these fairy stories that if you have a very delicate or attractive baby or child, fairies want to grab him up and take him.
Yes.
As their own. And so his son, they said had a slight pale frame and gave him the countenance of one weaker than he was. And so the neighbors warned him, the fairies lived over the knoll, and they might find one so slight and dreamy, the perfect prize for the land of night. And so that's why he's like...
Land of light.
That's why I said land of light.
I thought you said night.
Light.
Yes.
Light. That's opposite.
Yes, thank you.
And so that's an important part of the story. That's why he has to put this thing that would ward off the fairies. And also I liked, in several of these stories, it's common folk that are working hard, that are devoted to their family, and just minding their own business. And they lead a simple but productive and content life.
Yeah.
And I just thought that's just pleasant.
Yes.
Just a pleasant thought.
I knew you would like these stories because it's a lot of, family members, usually fathers in these cases, going back to find their children or good people protecting these children, which I knew you would like.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that is a part of it. I like how this guy is so devoted. I think, the wife died, and she,
yes.
And that reminds me of the old joke. There was a movie, Dave, and it was about a president whose wife died, and so he was a single president, and that was unique. And I think this was like this would have been in the 90s. So this was I think it was during Bill Clinton's term of office, and they had a Bill Clinton. I think it was an impersonator. This just came to me, so I'm not exactly prepared to tell the story.
Okay.
But it was a guy who did impersonate. I think it was what's his name, Daryl Hammond, maybe did a really good Bill Clinton impersonation, and he was giving a movie review on like the news program at SNL, and he was talking about the movie Dave, and he says, "This is my favorite movie. It's about a president whose wife died, and then he's single, and he's in the presidency, and he's in the White House, and his wife had died." It was just so funny. So there's always a line of movies, and now there's like a modern movie like Taken, that you see a theme of estranged fathers rescuing daughters or rescuing children after they have failed them.
Yeah.
Really as a parent for whatever reason, or they separated, or whatever the destruction of the family unit was, but somehow one fantastic act of competence in their field of violence that caused the family unit to break up makes them a hero and causes reconciliation. So like a Taken and everything that is similar to Taken is the same kind of thing. So this is kind of reminds me of those stories. There seems to be a theme where there's a single dad, and then he has to rescue a kid, or the first one, the wife takes off.
True.
And the Seal story was the king's wife passed, and then brought in this witch stepmother.
Yes. True.
Anyway, I don't even know where we were.
So Neil had gone to sleep without even thinking about putting the rowan branch above the door. So later the next day, Alistair returned and found the body of his son shriveled and yellow in his bed, telling his father that he was ill. For several days, Alistair cared for his son, but his condition didn't improve, so he sought the advice of a wise man who proclaimed that Neil had been taken by the little people and was replaced by a changeling.
That is really a scary... I've never heard these stories before. Have you ever heard these stories before?
I've heard of them. I think I mentioned this back when we talked about Celtic myths, in that there was an idea that, if you have this, strange little child, it's probably a changeling. Your actual child has been taken by fairies. I did mention that. Yes, so this is where we're getting stories of that.
I'd forgotten those words of wisdom.
Yes,
and
but
the foreshadowing of the Scottish fairy stuff.
Yes, but it's really freaky. And so to ensure that it was actually a changeling, the wise man instructed Alistair to carry eggshells full of water as if they weighed 10 tons, and then arrange them around the fire where the changeling could see them. So Alistair did so, and a thin voice proclaimed from Neil's bed that was a sight that he had never seen in his 800 years of living, proving that this was indeed a changeling. The wise man then advised Alistair to construct a large fire, and when the changeling asks, "What's the use of that?" he must grab him by the shirt and throw him in the fire. Alistair did so, and as the changeling hit the flames, he flew straight through the roof in a sour yellow smoke. The wise man told him to fetch a Bible, a sword, and a rooster in order to return Neil, and so he set out on the night of the full moon when the door to the fairies' knoll would be open. Coming to the knoll, Alistair thrust his sword into the doorframe, for no fairy could move a mortal man's sword.
They couldn't touch
a mortal man's sword, yes. Inside, he saw his son as small as the fairies, working silently at the forge, and Alistair demanded that they release Neil as he held the Bible in the air, for fairies have no power over a man holding the Lord's book. The fairies began to dance and sing a song that threatened to overcome Alistair's mind, and he stumbled, dropping the rooster, whose crow immediately scared the fairies away, for they fear the coming of dawn, lest they be turned to stone. Alistair took his son, and as they left the knoll, one last fairy cursed Neil to not speak ever again, and with that the fairies were never seen again. And so it was that the father and son returned home happily, and lived contentedly, despite Neil being mute. One day as Neil forged a sword, he had a flash of memory, recalling the intricate forging of fairy swords, and he leapt into action, making his sword and holding it up, then proclaiming that it would never fail the man who held it. With that, Neil had unwittingly severed the fairy curse with the fairy sword, and the chief of his clan used the sword, never again losing a battle. I'm going to read here from the book. Neil and his father, Alistair MacEacairn, returned to their cottage, the finest blacksmiths in all the land, their forge casting a glow that could be seen from hills all around, almost as far as the land of light, where the fairies kick up their heels in fury at the thought of that blacksmith and his clever son. So I really like this story. It's a very, like you said, kind of uplifting, almost heartwarming story.
Yes.
And I think it's neat, even at the end, he has this son who can't speak, and they still have a happy life, and they still do good things together. So it's not like, he's depressed and sad. He has his son back, but his son's forever changed. He's just happy to have his son back, and he still makes a good life for his son. It doesn't really. I think it's a year and a week that he's mute since coming back from the ferry. So it's a full year with his son that he never speaks a word, but he still loves his son and cares for him. So it is I do like this story. It's a great story.
Excuse me. I like this one line as he describes that. Neil's tongue was frozen by the curse of the fairies, but his manner was unchanged, and his father and his son lived contentedly. For speech is not always necessary to those who live simply, and things and people to which they have grown accustomed. And that's just such a well written line.
Yeah,
and it has a lot of truth to it.
And sometimes you just don't need to talk at all. It's just fine to just be in that person's presence and just do good things together.
And I think it's a recognition of the, should I say masculine trait? But it's I guess I would say, the strong silent type that used to be the archetype. It still is in some of pop culture, but that was the most typical thing, like the Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns. Even John Wayne movies back in the day, a lot of those kind of movies. A lot of Denzel Washington movies tend to be that way too. He doesn't say a whole lot, but when he speaks, like his character has meaning. I just thought there was a lot of truth to that, and I think in today's world, there's too much talking.
Yeah,
and not enough action.
We say on the podcast.
Yeah, well, it's true, but we're also doing reading.
That is true.
So it's not like. And we only do it once a week. So I'm not saying, and it's just like that. I mean, I'm not saying you have to be silent for a year and a week.
Yeah.
But there's so much stuff on social media where it's like somebody will put some information out there, and there'll be some snarky retort that doesn't even really mean anything or address the actual point of it, or expand anybody's knowledge. It's just, well.
I mean, everybody can say things. Not everybody can do things.
That's
it's
true.
like, you can say this, but what are you actually doing to solve this problem that you allegedly see?
Yeah, I think it's time for you to go back to go to trade school.
Especially
if I had to do it all over again, I might.
Really? Farming?
Then no, I think that's too hard. And you'd have to have land. I never had land.
That is true.
You can buy land, but you have to work on something else to get the money to buy land.
That is true.
No, like a skilled, like electrician, carpentry's hard, and but I mean, not that electrician work is not physically hard. It is,
yes,
but it's not as heavy lifting like stuff and power tools and all that stuff. But yeah, I think there's a undervalued nature of being able to get stuff done.
True, very true.
Physical stuff. But I really like this, and I like that. It seemed like a story that you could tell at a campfire, and because like when the wise man says, "Get the sword, the
sword, Bible, and rooster."
Yeah, the Bible. So it must be a relatively recent adaptation of the story.
He says in the initial introduction, like a lot of these are from the 17th and 18th century for the most part. These oral stories that were first recorded at those times.
Right,
so.
right. And so, and then the crowing cock or the rooster or whatever. And I'm like, what do I need a sword for these little fairies? And it wasn't to fight them.
Yeah.
It was to hold open the door, the gateway.
Yeah, this is another common theme. I think we'll see either this story or a couple stories later. They can't touch any metal of a mortal man. So.
Right.
Which is an interesting concept.
Yeah, so then you can see somebody telling this story and then telling another one of these stories. And they all kind of have a similar theme of these little fairies that could either bestow some, power or health upon you, or they'll snatch up your little baby and, and replace it with some sort of evil changeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Freaky.
Yeah.
The next story is also
reminds me of a cartoon. It was a Bugs Bunny cartoon, I think, or that era. It was like Bugsy. It was like a gangster, but it was a baby. He was really small, and he had an appearance of a baby, but he had to shave every morning, and he'd smoke a cigar. But when he's on the run from the police, he'd pretend he's a baby.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
I forget the name of the character, but this kind of reminds me of that, where he can go ooh goo goo gaga, but then when somebody's out of the room, then he pulls out the cigar and hey man, we gotta get this, rob this bank.
The next story is also about changelings, the fairy changeling. There once was a fisherman's wife who at long last had a child, but he was so small and weak that her neighbors warned her that he would almost certainly be taken by fairies to the land of light, where they danced, sang, and played all day. Thinking that a life of laughter would give her baby health, she set her child out on the rocks, waiting with him all night and sleeping for but a few moments. But when day came, it appeared that her child was still there. Returning to the cottage, the baby demanded food, nursing fiercely and demanding porridge, but no matter how much she fed him, he remained small, but became more yellow. She took her child to a wise man, who said it was a changeling, and she must watch him, for the changeling would soon reveal himself. As she later secretly spied on her baby, he suddenly sat up and brought a chanter out from under the mattress and began to play, then taking the form of an old wizened fairy. The next day, instructed by the wise man, the fisherman's wife laid her changeling baby on a rock by the sea, and as the tide reached him, he rose to his full height, howling and shaking his fist at the woman, for fairies cannot swim. Several fairies then came and danced helplessly on the shore, and the woman ordered them to return her baby, and she would rescue the stranded fairy. They did so, and her child was now strong and healthy, and so she returned the fairy, afterwards living a happy life with her child, silently thanking the little people who had made him strong. So I apologize for any background noise now. It has now started raining, but that'll just add to the moodiness of these stories. Let's hope it doesn't start raining too hard or thundering too much.
I don't think it's going to thunder today. I think it's just kind of a dreary Scottish rain. I think God is setting the mood. For
This is now an ASMR podcast.
What does that mean?
You've never heard of that? That's like the weird like YouTube videos where they like make noises, like help some people fall asleep. Like they'll tap the microphone or stuff. That's really picking up.
That. I used to listen to a cassette recording of a thunderstorm.
Well, maybe this will help put our listeners to sleep more than they already do.
And but I'd have to make sure I get to sleep before the half-hour mark, where the cassette would go click and wake me up because it would stop.
What'd you think of this story? This woman does not seem like a very good mother. I'm going to be honest with you.
Why?
Because she sacrificed her baby to the fairies.
No, they're supposed to. The fairies are supposed to give health to the. I thought it was. I viewed it as very similar to women who are. She has a sick child, and they didn't have health care back then, and she thought that her little baby would have a life of health and happiness, dancing with the fairies for the end of time.
I guess that's true.
I saw it as a nice, pleasant attempt, stupid attempt at sacrificing her happiness for the health and the happiness of her child.
I guess you do have a point. I guess I'm just jaded.
Yeah, when I'm the voice of optimism, usually I've become too cynical.
I don't know. I guess I just don't like the idea of just hoping that your baby gets kidnapped by mystical beings.
Yeah,
I don't support that.
Well, it turned out okay, though.
I guess it did turn out okay.
But the problem was they switched it with a changeling. They should have just said, "Hey, lady, we're taking the baby to happiness and laughter and stuff."
Yeah,
and then she ended up getting the child back, and he was healthy, right?
That is true. That is true.
And in this one, I think at the end of the story, she was pleased and thankful. She was silently thanking the little people who had made him strong.
That is fair.
And so what she did was absolutely 100% correct.
Okay. I guess I won't argue there.
It was a risky strike.
It was a risky, yes. Very risky. Very risky.
I would not have advocated for...
Because at the end of the day, she had only heard rumors from her neighbors that her baby would be taken to this land of happiness.
True.
So she did not know for certain if her baby would actually be happy or if she would just be like kidnapped by these fairies and like eaten or something.
Well, a couple hundred years ago, child mortality was pretty high.
That is true. That is also true.
So maybe the odds of the fairy rescuing the child were about even Steven.
Maybe.
So and she was trying to stay awake the entire time so she could see it, and I'm assuming talk to the fairies, make sure that they have good intents.
Yeah.
Maybe interview them.
I guess it's
check their references.
Yes, of course. I guess it's probably like Santa.
Yes.
They won't come if you're watching. So
correct.
It's probably taken while she was asleep.
Correct. I think that was
probably the idea.
Story,
yes,
that she was waiting by the fireplace like a little kid.
Well, she was waiting outside.
I know. But like a little kid with Santa Claus.
Sorry. I was
confused.
The
Santa Claus analogy. I'm following with it. Don't reprimand me.
I'm so sorry.
I'm running with your analogy. All right.
Moving on to the next story: the thirsty plowman.
I didn't quite get this one, but
this one was interesting. Yeah. I don't know. The moral here is interesting.
Yeah.
Donald and Ewan, two men from Brewster, were
what? Donald And Ewan.
Ewan, yes. Two men.
Is it Ewan or Ewan?
Ewan.
Ewan?
Ewan.
Like Ewan...
Ewan McGregor.
McGregor.
Yes.
Ewan McGregor.
Yes, Ewan McGregor.
The only good actor from that one Star Wars movie. The one with the guy from Taken.
Yes, Liam Neeson.
Liam Neeson has been phoning it in a lot of movies. And those... What was that one? What was that movie? The first... Phantom Menace?
Phantom Menace, yeah.
Horrible. And he's horrible in it.
Yeah.
And it's like... I could see him thinking, I can't believe I am saying these words.
Yeah. Well, he was asked once, like, did you even read the script beforehand and that sort of thing? Because the dialogue in those prequel
really
movies, we're talking about the Star Wars movies, of course. And he said something along the lines of, I don't really care. I got to be a Jedi. Huh. So, I mean, that's kind of fair, actually. If you get to be a Jedi in a big Star Wars movie, if it's a bad script, oh well,
But he didn't seem to really own it.
Yeah.
Like Alec Guinness, when he was in the original, which is the fourth or whatever, movie, he went with it, and he was a highly established actor, and had been in great movies, and like he was in The Bridge Over the River Kwai, one of the best movies ever made. I think that's him. Yeah, Alec Guinness. Yeah. I mean, in fantastic movies, and he's in this goofball. A fantasy movie that they didn't think would do squat, and if I remember correctly, George Lucas waived like a salary in lieu of the licensing, and they thought he was crazy. They jumped on it, and that's how he became a billionaire. Yeah, or whatever, however much money he has. Is he had all the licensing and the future rights.
Interesting.
And the studio's like, fine, we won't pay you the $100,000. Yeah, or whatever it was. It was not a lot of money because they never imagined it would be the top grossing movie. I think of all time at that point.
Yeah, probably 1977.
Anyway, back to the story.
Yes, that was a complete tangent. Yeah, just off the name Ewan. Donald and Ewan.
And that reminds me.
Oh, my God.
I'm just joking.
Donald and Ewan, two men from Brewster, were walking home and were very thirsty after a long day of plowing. After some time, they heard the sound of a woman working at a churn, and Ewan greatly desired buttermilk, but Donald did not. They proceeded over a hillock, coming to the maiden, who offered them buttermilk. But Ewan refused to drink, for he neither knew the maiden nor the milk source. But Donald drank deeply, despite not caring for buttermilk, then declaring it was the best that he had ever had. The maiden then said that he who had asked for the buttermilk but had not drank would live a short life, but the one who did not ask and still drank would have a long and good life. I read here from the book. And so it was that Ewan returned home that night and took to his bed, never to waken. For the fear of God had been put into him that day by the maiden on the hill, who could be none other than a witch. And Donald lived a long and prosperous life, plowing his field alone, but reaping better crops and amassing great riches. He looked always across the knoll, listened intently for the sound of milk in the churn, but never again did he see the witch or fairy, though he blessed her often. So the moral here is interesting. So Ewan goes out wanting the milk. Donald does not. But then when it's offered, Ewan does not take it, but Donald does. And so Donald is blessed for that, and Ewan is cursed. Why do you think that is?
Why do you think it is? I want your thoughts.
My thoughts, I don't know. I guess it's more of a lesson of, beggars can't be choosers, first of all. They're thirsty. They have no other options. And he's like, oh, I want this. And then he doesn't follow through. And then also, kind of like I was saying, you do have to follow through on the things that you do want. If you're going out proclaiming, I want this thing and I want this other thing, and then you're like, well, never mind, I don't actually want to do that. I think that's also a lesson there. And I think on the other side, it's also a lesson of, take the good things that are offered to you. Because, that was Donald's, big benefit there. He didn't really question it too much. He just saw it as a good thing and a blessing, and he took it.
Yes. I think it's very similar to the saying, don't look a gift horse in the mouth.
Yes.
Yes. I didn't know why he had to die quickly. But it was a curious story, and I guess it's also he's fearful. He's wanting this, but he didn't know her, didn't really know anything about her or what she had, the buttermilk or whatever, and so he was afraid of what could happen. And Donald was just thirsty. They're both very, very thirsty, and Donald's like, well, I don't really like buttermilk, but she offered it. So, and it's kind of like, it's ungrateful and it's kind of rude. Yeah. Somebody offers you something, and it turned out it was the best buttermilk ever made. Yeah. So I guess it's
I mean, it also kind of reminds me, I think we talked a little bit about this in the Norse myths, that you're supposed to offer whatever you can to a traveler. That's like a big theme in those myths. And I'm assuming it would be incredibly rude for the traveler then to deny it.
right.
Right? If you offer him a home and stuff and he says, no, I don't know you.
Right.
I feel like that would be like one of the biggest slights. And especially, at a time when a lot of people were living in just poverty,
Right.
to just turn down a gift by a stranger would be seen as incredibly rude.
Yeah.
I would assume.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good lesson. All right.
Just a good lesson.
So if you're ever in a field
And some
fair
strange
maiden-
woman offers you milk.
yes, a bonny lass.
Yes. Say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Moving on to the next story. Wee Johnny in the Cradle.
Ooh, yeah.
Yes.
This one hit home.
A man and wife once had a child named Johnny who would cry non-stop. And he was such a disturbance that his crying stopped the flight of birds overhead, and all creatures of the woodlands kept a great distance from him. Noticing how tired and weak the parents were becoming, their neighbor, a kindly tailor, offered to take in the child for a day, and the parents happily agreed. Prepared for a day of wailing, the tailor was shocked to hear a deep voice asking for whiskey coming from the baby's mouth. In giving this child whiskey, the tailor said that he must be a fairy. The fairy responded that his parents would never believe the tailor. Then asking for music, and unable to play, the tailor gave Johnny a straw with which he played exquisite music, stopping only when the parents were within earshot, at which point he resumed his wailing. The tailor then told them everything, and sure enough, they didn't believe him, but he ordered them to do the same thing the next day, but to secretly return to the tailor's cottage. Doing so, they returned to see Johnny drinking whiskey and playing his music, and so they flew into the cottage and threw the baby onto a hot griddle, at which he immediately disappeared into smoke. Then there was silence, which was broken by a small gurgle suddenly crying out. And to their surprise, the actual Johnny was in the cradle, a very happy baby. So another story of another child being replaced by a fairy and that sort of thing. I think this is more similar to the reference that you were making with the child, asking for whiskey and a drink and music. Yeah, which is very funny.
You skipped over the most important part.
Oh, did I?
That the fake baby said, "Fetch me a straw," to play like a flute, I guess.
Yes.
Which should remind you of me every time we go to Quick Trip.
Oh.
To make obnoxious noises.
Yes, through a plastic straw.
Through a plastic straw.
Yes,
like a flute.
that is fantastic.
I have little exclamation marks.
I was imagining like an actual straw of grass. You know how some people can do and put those like in their mouth and they blow like real high notes. I was imagining that.
Okay, I was thinking of a more modern version of this.
Yes, I was imagining.
Right.
Yes,
you're right.
Yes,
yeah. Well, that's what I thought of.
Yes,
and the tailor could not play music, but at the end he
starts
was whistling a tune that he could not. What was it? He could. I think aren't these stories where they could whistle a tune or they can kind of remember a tune, but they cannot play it.
Yes, he whistled to himself a tune which was so exquisite, so effortlessly beautiful that he was quite calmed.
Right.
So I guess the implication there is that he is whistling the tune of the fairy.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Which is kind of a neat image there.
Yes.
Yeah. Another neat story, another changeling story.
Yes.
Makes me question, right? Because there are so many stories about changelings.
Yes.
How many Scottish people thought their baby was a changeling and murdered a child?
It certainly seems like a legal defense that they created because they had a colicky kid and they decided to murder him.
Yeah.
But this case, they did rush to judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, most likely, a baby under these circumstances drinking whiskey and demanding a smoke or whatever, it would be a changeling or a fairy.
Mm-hmm.
It worked out in the end because by killing that thing, I assume it got killed.
Yes.
Or what do you think?
Well, this is what happened to the other fairy. He disappeared into a poof of smoke. So I guess that's the common way to get rid of fairies is to burn them and they disappear into smoke.
I wonder if they die or if they're reincarnated in fairyland.
I would assume that they're reincarnated in some fashion.
I assume they're dead.
You assume they're dead?
Yeah, because there's no story. Because the fairies are referenced that they, may, like the other story, that they, were at the outskirts of town mad at the blacksmith and the son because they successfully thwarted them or whatever. But you don't have them saying, and the fairy who was thrown into the fire would stare at them. It's like I think that fairy's gone.
Maybe.
At least I hope so.
Yes. Another changeling story.
Yeah. So to anybody out there, if you have a crying kid, it is not a changeling.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really exist.
Yes.
So don't throw it on the fire.
The next story is that of the fairy dancers, and this was my favorite one in this section, and I will
I don't
explain
know why
why.
they wouldn't try to catch the fairy, and like put him in a cage and maybe take him on a tour.
Well,
because
they cast spells and stuff. They put
they
you in
are
a trance and
dangerous.
stuff. They are
Yes,
dangerous,
yeah.
so probably not a good idea to keep
I
a
guess
fairy
that's why you
captive.
gotta hurry up. Like you have to have the fire ready.
Mhm.
Once he knows that you got to get rid of
Because
him.
otherwise he's going to put you under his spell.
All right. Fair
Yes.
enough.
Moving on to-
Fairy dancers.
Yes, my favorite story in this section.
Really?
Yes, and I will explain why.
When now?
When after the story, actually, yes. One Christmas Eve, two farmers sought by Loch Etive. Wanting a good drink, they set out for an inn known as King's House to get a 3-gallon barrel of whiskey. After spending some time there, they set out for home, the barrel on the back of the youngest man. Before long, they heard the sound of music and saw a far-off light, and so they went towards it, hoping to find a party. Coming to the source, they saw many beautiful dancing women in front of a hill, and very enticed, the younger man entered a door in the hill, which shut behind him and disappeared. The other farmer returned home, first telling the man's wife what had happened, but she clearly did not believe him, and before long, policemen were called and he was sent to prison in the hope that he would tell a more realistic story. However, his story never changed and he was released, and a year later, he was on the same road with some lads who were tasked with catching fish for the Christmas Eve feast. He again heard the music, and all the others carried on and returned home. He came to the hill to find his friend, there seeing the dancing women and the door in the hill. He entered, placing his fishhook in the doorframe, and the fairies attempted to overcome him with their music.
Wait a second. You
What?
gotta explain why you put the fish hook there.
Because a fairy cannot touch the metal. Yes, correct.
Even a small fish hook keeps that door open.
Yes. And their music attempted to overcome him, but this farmer never liked to dance, instead preferring a good smoke and a dram of whiskey, and so he pressed on, finding his friend and dragging him away. They returned home to the surprise of the younger man's wife, and he still had the whiskey on his back.
When he finds his buddy who's dancing, he says, "Come on, let's go." And he says, "Ach, lad, we've only just begun."
Yes.
He's been dancing for a year straight.
True.
It sounds like a drunk Scottishman.
Yes, probably.
Just begun. Give me that dram of whiskey.
Yes, and so he returned home to the surprise of the younger man's wife, and he still had the whiskey on his back. Reading again from the book. And they sat up that night, the man and his friend, and each of their wives, and what a Christmas Eve they had with that barrel of whiskey, which had mellowed with the warmth of the fairy hill, and they drank it all, just 12 months late. Now, the reason this is my favorite story...
Because they drank 3 gallons of whiskey between
Not
the four of them?
not that. Although that is something. But the fact that he was able to overcome the music and the spells of these fairies just because he preferred a smoke and whiskey,
Yes.
which I thought was admirable and very, very Scottish.
Uh-huh.
I thought that was that is why that is my favorite story. Magic is nothing compared to alcohol and smoke.
Well, there are certain guys that are not for instance, when I go to a ballroom dance thing with your mother, I don't smoke, although I need to take it up.
No, you don't.
She's itching to get on the dance floor, but I'm content. I'm not swayed by the spell of the music and dance, but swayed by her, but not by the music.
Yes. What'd you think of this story, the fairy dancers?
I enjoyed it. I liked the language used. I think they had a little dram at the King House that wouldn't end when they got the barrel, and seemed like a couple of good guys. And even after a year, and he was accused of murdering the guy, he still went hunting for him when he thought there's an opportunity, however remote, he could rescue him. And sure enough, he did. And then he didn't hold a grudge against the wife who didn't believe him, because it was kind of a crazy story. Yeah. And they're all friends. And they drank some whiskey. And it was a great Christmas Eve. And,
It's just another very pleasant story about good people. Oh.
Yeah, generally, yeah. I think that they didn't do anything wrong. They weren't being punished for being evil.
I guess the only mistake they made was being too trusting of the dancing women in the forest. But
well, I mean, what they did wrong, which is what a lot of guys do on their way back with a barrel of whiskey, is they took a detour to go find a party.
Yes.
So in a sense, they shouldn't have done that. But it was a somewhat innocent move. That was the mistake. If they're supposed to just come straight home.
Yes.
So it's similar to when a guy goes out and I'll be back in a couple hours, and he comes home at sunrise. which happens sometimes, and really having I was at this party.
Are you speaking from experience?
No, not anything recent. A couple decades since this guy stayed out all night. Oh, there was one time when I worked at Sam's Club, and there was this guy. I won't mention his name. He's older, but he's now. I mean, now my age. Now I'm younger than when he was then, but I think he was in his early 40s. Great guy, and he worked with us. He worked full-time job for the government, and he worked a couple nights a week, and on the weekends at Sam's Club, stocking freezers with us. Great guy, love him to death. I assume he's passed by now. I know he had some health issues last time I had any contact, which is like anyway. I'm getting sideways.
Yes.
So we would work the 6 a.m. shift on Sunday mornings, and so I pulled up. And it's still dark out sometime, the winter months, but this was kind of a warmer spring day, and I pull up, and we walk up to the front door. The manager, we have to wait for the manager to unlock the door, and they had a picnic table, like for people to, have I guess a little break there, but we didn't serve food there at the time. But there's a picnic table out front. As I walk up, I see his name is Gil. I'll just say his name is Gil. And Gil is sleeping on the picnic table. And I said, "Hey, Gil." I thought he was just kind of relaxing. He was out. And he's like, "Oh," and he was still in the clothes that he was in the day before.
Oh, no.
And he loved to go to the racetrack and the gambling boat. And he told me all about his night, and he won. And then another time he came in, it wasn't quite an all-nighter, but he came in only like an hour or two sleep, and he comes. He was late, so we're already in there working, but he's only about 10 minutes late. He comes in and he this huge refrigerator unit. So we're inside the refrigerator unit. It's me and another guy named Mark, and he says, "Marks, I hit the trifecta," which is a type of bet on a racetrack. It was the greatest night ever. And he was just a funny guy, but that's the way he lived, and I think he just worked there just for the fun of it, to hang out with us, and his extra money for him.
Yeah.
But great guy, but he didn't mind to have a couple drinks.
Yes, sounds very similar to the people in the story.
Yes, it would absolutely be something Gil would do. He would go down to the next village and he'd get a barrel of whiskey and carry it on his back, and then get sidetracked with a party. A bunch of dancing fairies.
That's great.
But the kind of guys like that make the world go round.
Yes. The next story, and the last story in this section, is not quite as cheerful. It's a dead wife among the fairies. A man once lived in the lighthouse with his beloved wife, but the day came when she died and was buried, and the husband became a little mad, not even lighting the lighthouse, instead just staring at her grave. He was determined to have her back, and so he went to see a witch, but even she warned him to leave the dead with the fairies, for any mortal who returned would be turned to dust in the light. Nevertheless, he begged her for a plan, and she told him to go to a cave at the base of Versebrech on the night of a full moon, with a black cat, a Bible, and a thick wooden staff. He was to cry for his wife, and read to her from the book of Psalms, and when he had heard her voice, he must throw the cat in the cave and wait for her to reappear. But the fairies would not let her leave the land of light easily, and so he must use the staff to beat them. The man was able to do all of this, and I'm going to read here from the book. And there was his wife, paler to be sure, and nothing more than skin and bones, but she smiled her same familiar smile, and although her body held no warmth and she smelled rather sour, he held her to him once again and heard her tender voice. Together they walked to their lighthouse home, snug in a warm embrace. They lit their beacon in the mists and fogs which fell over the sea like a woolen blanket. When day broke, his wife was safe in the fairy cave again, for light would turn to dust any mortal who tried to return from the dead. And so her husband would watch carefully as the moon waned and then waxed when they could meet again. Mm-hmm. So again, we see the full moon there as being representative of when you can go and see the fairies and that sort of thing. Also, another story of someone somewhat unsuccessfully trying to bring someone back from the dead. This was more successful than other stories, in which it's just more completely heartbreaking and it never succeeds, like we saw with Orpheus is the particular example in the Greek myths. But it's interesting. It's, again, another melancholy story, but it's not, like, terribly sad, if you know what I mean.
Well, I don't see it as melancholy.
Really?
I don't see that at all. I mean, here they're married for decades and had a full and happy life, just the two of them, which is an unusual thing, where they work and live together. And live, like I said, a full and happy life. And then after she passes, I mean, he's distraught, but he does. It seems like he's able to visit her even from time to time again now. In the
it looks like every full moon she can come back. I think is the insinuation there.
Yes, and so I thought it was a really pleasant and not melancholy. I mean,
I think there's a degree of melancholy there.
Why?
Because she's always got to go back to the dead, and she's never going to be there. Well, she's never going to be there fully.
Well, she's dead.
Well, I get that. I mean, but he doesn't want her to be dead.
Yeah, but it's more than anybody else has ever had when a spouse that they love dies.
That is true.
He gets to see her like once a month.
That is true.
Yeah, I don't see that as a bad thing.
But I think it is still tinged with some sadness. I think there's still that melancholy there.
Well, I think it'll be inconvenient if he finds another gal.
That is true.
Every month, his dead wife's ghost is going to show up. Hey, honey, give me a hug, and she smells a little sour. So that's a little unnerving.
That is,
and I'd be spooked by it myself. But I don't. That's not melancholy at all. It was a nice, pleasant story.
I disagree.
Why? Because she can't. He didn't resurrect her from the dead.
I mean, I think that's part of it. That she's never going to be with him fully again. She's always going to be a little different. Yes.
But once he dies, is he going to be with her?
Well, that's true for everybody.
Yeah, but if he resurrects her, then what's going to happen? She's going to be in this world and he's going to be gone.
I guess that's true.
Because if you pull him out, then when you die, what are you going to do? She can't rescue you because she's half in and half out. The only thing I think is wrong is that she's able to visit like that.
Yeah. And
he should. It would have been better or happier if he would have been pleased by the fact that she's in a happy place and is fine and reassured by that, and then he lived out his years as a happy, content man. I mean, that's I think a good story.
Yeah.
I think that this is complicated because he's kind of getting her to come out of that happier area once a month. It didn't seem like it was that pleasant for her. Because she was in the fairyland, which evidently, if you're there and it's not bad, I mean, you dance and whatever. It seems like a very happy place.
True.
So,
you have a point.
You're just wrong.
Okay.
You're just absolutely wrong on that one.
Okay.
And you agree to it now. You've conceded.
I have not, but all right.
I have to say that this is bothering me. You have these books on top of the headboard there, and they are not... symmetrical.
I'm very sorry about that.
That is bothering me.
They were at one point in time somewhat symmetrical, but now there are too many of them.
Those red ones have to be in the middle with stuff on or something.
I see.
Or maybe red on either side.
I see. Yes.
Thank
you for referring to that. The listener has no idea what's going on. I just have a bunch of books around my room.
She can see it. It's right there.
Yeah. It's yeah.
Turn the camera.
Yeah, I'll turn the camera. I'll point it right at the Oh my god.
Over there. See?
Yes, I see it. Yes, thank you.
On the right.
Yes.
But I thought all these stories. Sorry about that.
Yes, that was a complete aside.
I liked all the little stories. They have little lessons. They're not really myths, I don't think.
They're much more modern than I think many of the other stories we've seen. I mean, we've seen, policemen in jails and that sort of thing, which is not exactly... Well, I mean, I guess that's been around for a while.
We didn't call them constable or you call them authorities or whatever.
It's fairly...
There's always been a government authority as long as there's been any sort of...
That is true, but it definitely seems like these are from a more recent time.
And they're not really myths to explain some fundamental...
Yeah, it's like we were saying at the beginning. It's like, this person that this clan might know, this important figure in their history, he did this big thing, but it doesn't really have big implications for the rest of Scotland or for like a overall bigger mythology.
It's almost like some of those spirit tales from the African myths, about the trickster spider thing.
Yeah, Anansi.
Yeah, but there was a little bit more general overtones to it. But some of them were pretty specific.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
Yes, very different from the other Celtic myths we looked at, because those were more, when we looked at those were like the big cycles and that sort of thing. So every story in that section was part of a bigger story, and that sort of thing. So this is very, very direct and close.
Yes, I agree. They're fun little stories.
It's very enjoyable. Do you have any other thoughts on these stories of fairies and sea folk?
I am out.
You're out of thoughts?
I checked out.
All right, well, this has been Season 2, Episode 34, the 75th episode total of Unlimited Opinions. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter. Let us know what you think of these episodes at ULMTD Opinions on Twitter.
I saw there was a comment.
There was a comment
about the Machiavelli.
Yes, a suggestion from a
a
long-time listener. So you're not sure about Machiavelli?
I don't know.
I mean, you were the one who suggested it initially.
I know. It was just an idea, and I'm considering it. But I have not read it.
Yes.
Which maybe, obviously,
Yes.
I want to read something as part of the podcast I haven't read before.
Yes.
But I'm thinking maybe more of a general, both of these were survey works, like an overall survey of a subject, a big subject, history, Western philosophy, world mythology. I don't mind getting a little bit more
specific, you think?
Yeah, but I don't know if I want to have
one. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Maybe a topic, but I can't quite decide. What do you think?
I don't know. I kind of agree with you there. I don't know if I don't have any specific thoughts right now. But that comment was, of course, from longtime listener Richard Emerson of the Ancient World podcast. He's a podcaster himself. It's a good podcast.
And what does he podcast about? I've not listened to it.
Yes, I'm aware.
Was it the Ancient World?
The Ancient World, yes.
I guess he podcasts about the Ancient World. Does he have a duo or is he a solo?
He's a solo, yes. But he's more, he specifically focuses a lot on Dante and kind of using the Renaissance as kind of like the lens to look back at the ancient world. It's a good podcast.
Isn't that what we do? Because isn't that our gateway to even knowledge of the ancient world, the Western world? Is the Renaissance period, because that's when they rediscovered those works, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. But I mean, Dante specifically, I don't know if you've ever read the Divine Comedy, but he like brings up, as he's traveling through the underworld and that sort of thing, specifically like people and major things from the ancient. I mean, his guide is Virgil from the Aeneid.
Have you read Dante's Inferno?
I have not. I have it sitting up there in one of those red books.
Oh, okay.
Which I need to read it.
I remember starting to read it in college. And I thought, I'm going to read Dante's Inferno. Yeah. And I didn't. I mean, it was difficult reading. It wasn't like modern prose where you read it and you absorb it like a novel. You gotta really work at it.
Yes.
Because it's a translation from what was his original language?
Italian. He's
Yeah.
kind of credited as being the somewhat creator or the first person to use the modern Italian language. So he's important. He's notable for that. I guess you have no thoughts on that.
I'm thinking.
You're thinking.
But yeah, interesting. Maybe I'll listen to it.
Yes.
I don't have a lot of time to listen to podcasts. I don't listen to ours because I was present when it was recorded.
Yes, I don't listen to ours either after it's edited.
I did listen to a couple initial ones.
Which I actually listened. I went back and listened to the first bit of the first episode we ever did. It is rough compared to what we're doing now.
What do you mean?
Like there's so many ums and uhs,
really?
and we don't. It's clear like we are not comfortable with what we're doing. Like we've definitely improved over time.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I wonder if our listener agrees. I only listen to 2 podcasts.
Really?
Victor Davis Hanson and Joe Rogan.
Yes.
But I don't listen to all. Joe Rogan has an output like crazy.
Yeah, like every day or almost.
Like his
that's his job, yeah.
I was thinking about one of the earlier stories. Which one was it? Oh gosh,
I don't know.
I was thinking of the lesson of taking the opportunities that are presented to you. Was it the Dram one?
That was the buttermilk one.
And it made me think. Well, it made me think of Joe Rogan because he's big on you got to take risks and stuff. You got to believe in yourself enough to take the risks that you believe in, and that's basically what he's done in his career. Of course, it worked out great for him. It doesn't work out for everybody, but it's also the same similar themes in Matthew McConaughey's most recent book, Green Lights, where he in his I'm not going to ruin the book, but it's basically like consider the setbacks or developments as green lights to do something, and it's a funny book. I think I have it around here somewhere. Maybe I took it to the office, but you ought to read it sometime.
Interesting.
Yeah, he's an interesting cat.
Yes.
But of course, he just kind of fell into everything too. Although he worked hard. I'm not trying to minimize it. And he took a lot of risks with his career because he believed in himself and his ability to be successful.
Yes.
And it's a hard thing for people to do, and it's really hard when you got a family and kids. So you got to do it when you're young. Like at your age, you got to decide, hey, I want to do that, and you got to be able to believe in yourself to do it and follow through. Take the risks, and don't worry about how the future is going to work out if you really believe that you can do it.
It's inspiring.
Just like the buttermilk dude.
That is true.
I'm thirsty.
Like Donald.
Yeah, you got to be more like Donald and not like Ewan. I don't know, who's this lady? You just asked for buttermilk, you jackass. You came all the way over here because you heard the churn, right?
Yes.
He heard it. He saw it. He walks up to it. Yeah, about the buttermilk. She said, "Here, you want some?" No. What is that? You know? You went all the way over there. You're thirsty. You're complaining about, oh, I wish I could have some buttermilk. Oh, I want some buttermilk. And then he says, no, I think that's really the lesson. You know, the more I think about it, the more I hate Ewan. And I'm glad he died early. You know, Donald's just like, you know, just going along. I don't think I like buttermilk. But and then she says, well, you want some of this buttermilk? Oh, I guess so. I'm thirsty, but thanks. You know, and he doesn't turn it down because he doesn't like buttermilk. Mm-hmm. It's a gift, and he's thirsty, so he drinks it. It's the best thing he ever had. And he has a long, successful life. Be more like Donald.
All right. I think it's clear that we've been talking for over an hour because you are now in your rage mode. You are angry at things.
No, it's not anger. It's inspiration.
Is that what we're calling it?
It's not anger. Mm-hmm. Anger is an emotion. It's hatred.
Oh, okay.
Hatred can be cold. Mm. And so I hate the character Ewan for being a bitch. He's a coward. But it's not, you know, it's hatred, not anger.
Yes.
Most of my rants are hatred, not anger. Mm-hmm. People confuse that because you get excitable, but it's not anger.
Yes.
And a lot of times it's humor. But I can go on a rant on a number of different subjects and I'll never be angry.
Interesting. Thank you for those uplifting thoughts. I think we need to stop recording. They are uplifting.
There was an uplifting message of be like Donald. It's also hatred of Ewan. You can't have a completely positive. Every message that is positive is also equally negative.
Okay. How?
Because you're refuting the opposite.
I guess that is true.
You know, when you say I love God, you have to hate the sin. You know, to do good, you have to hate the bad.
Yeah,
not be angry, emotional, but you have to reject it and repudiate it. So the more strident, the more strong you are on a positive, the more negative you are on the negative. True. 2 negatives is a positive. So people mistake that, and they often confuse my enthusiasm with something negative. And it's so positive that it's negative.
Okay. I mean, I guess there's some amount of sense there.
There's 100% sense to that.
You just went on a rant about how much you hate Ewan, yes. And that is a positive message.
It is a 100% positive message about why you should be Donald and not Ewan.
Isn't it not 50-50 then? 50% positive, 50% negative?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
You just said it was 100% positive.
100% positive, 100% negative. Makes it a 0. The more positive you are, the more negative you are.
Huh.
And all these people, I love everybody. No, you don't. You hate at least as many people as you love. Because everybody hates Hitler, but they don't put him in the equation. And there's a lot of Hitlers running around. And people don't realize that are not in the system to see the evil, how much evil there is. And when you think I'm joking when I look out the window of our house on the second story and I look upon our neighborhood and the far reaches of the Festus region, and I say softly, look at all those freaks out there. You think I'm joking?
I think I'm actually watching you become a cartoon supervillain right now. I think I just hit your head.
It's not a supervillain; it's a superhero.
That's what the villain always says. This is it. This is devolving.
Can Batman exist without all the other people? And Batman's not really a hero.
That is what the villain would say.
Batman is not a hero. He's just a different type of villain.
Mm. Okay. I think we need to stop recording. It has been an hour and 5 minutes.
All right, that's fine.
Okay.
He's finally getting something going.
I mean, you can talk about how Batman is not a villain as much as you want. We stopped talking about the mythology 15 minutes ago.
Well, these aren't even really myths.
Yeah. Well,
this entire one isn't a myth. These are just folktales. Maybe we should do folktales. I don't know. I really enjoy the folktales.
I can tell. All right.
Are you done?
Are you done? Are you done?
I'm
Are you done? Okay,
right,
you're done. All right.
I'm
This has been season 2, episode 34.
Did we already do that?
Yeah, we did, and then we talked for another 15 minutes. I got to do it again. It's the end. It's the end. I got to do it again.
You don't have to do that again. We already did it.
This has been season 2, episode 34 of Unlimited Opinions. I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm not participating. I already did that, didn't I?
No,
I haven't done
No,
that.
you cut me off before we could get to that point.
I didn't already say that.
No,
I'm
you did
still
not.
Mark
You did
Bishop.
not say that you're still Mark Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
There we go. Oh my god, that was chaotic.
Huh.